Hey everybody, Mr. Grove here. Today we are going to talk about the reptiles. So this is phylum Chordata and class Reptilia. So the reptiles have a lot of characteristics. One of those is a really strong bony skeleton. So there's no cartilage here. These guys are all bone. And it's a really strong skeleton, which is why they can be really heavy. So the amphibians, we do not get all that big or heavy, but these guys can get, hundreds of pounds. We also have two sets of legs, most of them. Obviously, the snakes would not. And those legs are kind of positioned under the body, so that allows them to walk on land really well. There's also claws on the toes. If you've ever had a pet turtle and you put it in an aquarium and they start scratching as they're trying to dig, you'll quickly realize the claws under the toes. Sadly, we kind of joke about their small brains, but it's just relative to their body size. The brain is a little bit smaller than other things like mammals and birds and stuff. So ectothermic, so these guys are cold-blooded, so they need to get their energy from outside their environment. And so that's why that snake on a nice chilly spring morning isn't very active when you see them on the trail. Or if you've ever been on a float trip, you'll see all those turtles sunning in the logs in the morning trying to get as much energy as they can. The other thing is their skin is watertight. So that watertight skin really allows them to live on land. They don't, and that's not to keep water from getting in, but mainly to keep water from getting out. Another watertight is the amniotic egg. So we are now kind of away from water for reproduction. So the amphibians had to reproduce with their eggs in the water, but now we can reproduce on land. And so that's a big advantage. We also have really big, efficient lungs. And so those lungs can, completely sustain us on land as terrestrial animals. And our heart is advanced too. It's an almost four-chambered heart. So we're just not quite fully divided on the atrium, but almost. And then the last thing then we'd have is internal fertilization. And so that's going to be either oviparous or ovoviviparous. So oviparous would be our egg laying, and then ovoviviparous would be our live birth. And we have some reptiles that do both. Specifically, as we go through the orders, so the first order would be Squamata, and this is the lizards and snakes. And so these guys are mostly carnivorous, mostly predators, and this would be like the iguanas, chameleons, geckos, anoles, horned lizards. So these are all kind of our lizards. Their jaw is loosely connected together. And so that can allow them to eat kind of bigger things. Oftentimes they'll have tails that break off, and that's kind of a defense mechanism. So a predator grabs a tail, it breaks off, and they can escape while that tail kind of confuses the predator. But that is kind of our lizards for the Squamata aspect of things. And we also have our snakes on the Squamata side of the order. And so snakes obviously are not going to have the legs, no pectoral girdle, even in the skeleton. The jaw is usually 5 points of movement, so definitely can open up bigger, and that's where you can see snakes that swallow these really large animals. They will molt periodically, just like the reptiles on the lizard side of the order Squamata do as well. And so no movable eyelids, and typically snakes are kind of divided by how they feed. So some are just kind of seize and swallow, so like our garter snake here. So they're just going to grab the prey and then just kind of swallow it. Some will constrict, so like the boa constrictors and pythons and anacondas, and just kill the victim that way. And then some are venomous. Okay, so definitely three possibilities for the order Squamata. Here in Illinois, we've got in our area specifically, we have two Common venomous snakes, there's some weird exceptions depending on where you're at. But these are the main two venomous snakes that we would have in our area, and that's the water moccasin, which is also sometimes called the cottonmouth. You can see here because its mouth is very kind of cottony colored. And then the copperhead. The copperhead's kind of interesting because it's got this little yellow tail as a juvenile, and it develops that really kind of bronze coppery color as it gets into an adult. And so both of those are venomous. The venom is strong enough it could potentially kill a human, but that's not definitely a highly likely kind of thing in our area. Most people do survive that venom. Moving on, then the other order is going to be Chelonia, and so that's the turtles and tortoises. Okay. And then obviously we have our shells with the turtles. So the shell is not like on cartoons where they can slip in and out of them. That is fused to their skeleton. And the top part of the shell is going to be the carapace, and the bottom part is the plastron. Typically, we don't have teeth, but they have beaks, and most of the time are herbivores. But there are some turtles that would be predators, like our snapping turtles. So the vertebrae, like we said, are fused to the carapace. So that shell is part of the bone. They can't kind of slip out like they do in the cartoons. And then the other order is Crocodilia, and that's going to be our crocodiles, alligators, and caimans. And so these guys are obviously very good at predators, have that stealth and surprise. So their nostrils are kind of located up on top of their body, so that allows them to barely stick out and submerge the rest of their body. They also have a valve in their mouth that can help keep the water out of their lungs. They will, seize a prey a lot of times, and then they'll oftentimes do what's called a death roll, as they take that down and drown it, and then they will eat it. And so that's our crocodiles, alligators, and caimans. One other weird type is the tuatara, and that's kind of an isolated reptile that's in New Zealand. And so one of your videos kind of talks about some of the uniqueness of that. So I think that wraps us up on the reptiles, and I hope that was helpful.